Okay, there it goes.
Hi, my name is Arv Poddar,
Hi, my name is Shweta.
and today we're going to be showing you guys the beautiful electric Go Kart that we built. So the first thing that we're going to be showing you guys is the stuff that came to us, the order that it came to us in, and we'll be explaining to you some of that stuff. So what we're going to start with first is the motor kit. So what came in the motor kit was this motor right here. It is a 3,000 watt, 6,700 RPM motor. Its rated power is 4,900 RPM, but we're probably going to be running it at about 5,500 RPM. The next thing that came with this kit is the controller, the far driver controller. This is rated to match this at 72 volts, and the way that we needed to wire it was that there were some cables that came with the motor, which we needed to attach to the far driver. So we already knew where we were going to place the motor because there was like a very pre-built place for it. This was where the original engine for the Go Kart was. And we just needed to buy this bracket for it because it wouldn't fit earlier onto this. So this motor took about 2 weeks to arrive, and the first major problem that we had was that it came with this sprocket right here. What happened was that the chain that we originally had was very, very small compared to what we needed. So as you can see right here, this is sprocket. It does not fit in this chain. The rollers don't go into it at all. So what we needed to do was we needed to buy a sprocket. The first sprocket that we bought did not fit into the socket, into the shaft. So what we needed to do was we needed to figure out the diameter of the shaft, the exact measurements of it, and we needed to place it on. And even bigger of a problem that we had was trying to figure out how to take the screw out. So we needed to do research on that, and as crazy as it seems, it needed to be reverse threaded. So we needed to like actually tighten it rather than loosen it to our standards because it's a Chinese product. So then we bought another sprocket, and then we fit it on there, and thankfully it perfectly fitted.
When we were trying all of this sprocket, it wasn't enough, right? So me and my brother, we both, it was already over here. So what we did, we loosened all these bolts, and then we put it over here to hope that it would work without this bracket over here. Then we figured out that this wasn't lining up with this, and we were thinking that we were going to get a metal sheet and weld it on here and then bolt all of that. It would take a ton of time. Instead, I went to my friend's house, the person that sold us the chassis, and he told us that instead of that, you can just get a bracket, which would work just as well, and it would be way cheaper. Also, when it already had holes in it, so we didn't have to drill holes in the
So at this point, it's already been 1.5 months, and we're still waiting for this battery to arrive. So another issue that came up was that when we were looking at the chain wasn't the right size to fit onto the sprocket that we had bought. So what we needed to do was go out and buy another new chain, which would fit properly onto the sprocket. Because the old chain was not only old, it was also rusty, and it was short. So we needed to buy a longer chain. So when this chain did eventually come in, we were still waiting on this battery, and for everything to be assembled, we were basically just waiting for the battery to arrive because we needed to hold on and see if everything was actually going to come to us. So a huge drama happened 2 months into waiting for this battery to arrive. So what happened was that the place that we were buying it from, AliExpress, they were giving us the best deal for it. So of course we're going to go for this. And this was a very well reviewed product. So when we did buy it, it said that it was going to come in a month and a half, which is almost the same time that this came in. And we were just waiting and waiting and waiting, and then eventually the seller contacted us and said that we would most likely need to cancel the purchase because it wasn't going to come to us. Or they said we could wait a bit longer and have a chance that it would come through because it was stuck at customs. Eventually, after a while, they came back to us and they said that it was going to come to us, but it was going to take a long, long time. So we waited and waited and waited, and just 2 weeks ago, It showed up in 3 whole months. It took 3 months for this battery to come, which is like insane. So after these 3 months, we finally started assembling everything, and it barely took us a week. Barely took us a week to assemble absolutely everything.
So what we did was we found a storage container in this house, right, in our house, right, and then we packed it up with styrofoam so it would be packed in and it wouldn't like start moving all over the place and get damaged. And then we put this bungee cord because it would stay in place and it wouldn't go up and down since we figured out the sides and sides. Also, the battery connector, we had to get a battery connector from online that took a day, right? And then we had to put it in here. In the very beginning, we thought that it would be the hardest part to fit the battery because we had to drill holes into these metal tubes, but we thought were like really, really hard. So when the battery came, after like 3 months, we used this container and this block of wood, and we used this drill with these drill bits, and we put a hole through the metal tube. We thought it was going to be really hard, but then when we tried it, it was hard, but still like softer than what we thought it was.
So another thing that we needed to do was get a throttle adapter, because we wanted it to be how much ever we pushed into the throttle, that's how much response we would get into the actual wheels. That's how much power we would get from the motor. So what we needed to do was go and buy this power adapter, because the original one was meant for a bike, not for a Go Kart, so it was just like a regular twist throttle. So what we needed to do was put in the cable for this. It goes through this component and then attaches into this. So whenever we would spin the throttle, this spins, and that's how much power gets access for the motor. The issue that happened was that the cable was old, and it had no grease on it. It had nothing to lube it. So there was a lot of friction going on. It was not moving back. It would spin, but it would never let it spring back. The throttle adapter itself has a spring inside of it so that it pulls it back to the original position, which it was not doing because there was so much friction. So we needed to buy another cable, which came in a day or two. So there was no problem with that. Okay, so now the final part of this was wiring everything. Just like I mentioned before, the motor connected to the far driver, and just how Shlok mentioned before, the battery connects to the far driver as well. So the thing that we needed to figure out the most was this adapter. This was the main problem. So the way it's connected is that there's this black wire which has this. So there's all the positive, negative, and then the green for the control. And originally when this came, this was switched up in a way that it wouldn't match this. So I needed to figure out how to switch up these wires so that it would connect the right way. After that, so originally for this, there was the old motor, right, the old throttle, which had this. So that's what it was supposed to originally be, but we needed to attach this one, like for the reason that I told earlier. Then another thing that we needed to do was attach this, because that's the key slot. So this wire attached to the wire connected to the far driver, which would be for the key slot. Only if the key turns, then only it would work. It's just like a power switch. Then after that, we needed to do the Bluetooth. So there's a Bluetooth dongle for accessing programming for the far driver online. So like I said before, figuring out how much RPM I actually want the motor to run. We're going to be using different types for different reasons. Like if we just want to use it for fun, then we might go full speed. We might run full 6700 RPM, but daily we would be using about 5000 RPM.
Test number 1. Something needs to be set up. It's not going that fast. We'll have to figure it out. We'll see. But test number 1 successful.
So yesterday we did our first test, which I'll show somewhere over there, and what happened was when we were driving it, everything seemed to be working perfectly while going downhill, but as soon as we started going uphill, it gave no power at all. When I was sitting, when my dad was sitting, the only time it gave power was because when this little kid was sitting there, because he weighs nothing. And what happened was eventually when it did start rolling, this over here, the holder, this is what holds down this gear over here for the chain. What happened was that it slipped. There was no pin in there earlier. The pin that you see over here, this was not there. The key shaft, it was not there earlier, which we didn't notice. It was never there. We never realized that it wasn't there. So what happened was that when it was spinning, it eventually gave out, and the holder started spinning freely. So there was nothing holding it down. It just started spinning without the axle connected to it.
Now today we are gonna do our test number 2. Let's see if all the issues have been fixed.
On the way back.
This is the Far Driver app that we have connected to our Far Driver. So the issue that we had earlier was that the battery wasn't giving out enough power for the motor to run uphill. Our driveway is uphill, so we just wanted to test and make sure that it has enough torque. But then afterwards, we realized that the gear high power, gear middle power, and gear low power were both not set to their maximum settings. So we needed to change that as well as the speeds. Everything else is rated, everything else has the right stuff in there, but that was the main thing that we needed to change.
After all the changes and modifications, we are gonna do our final test drive. We are confident that it is working, and now the kart is gonna go much faster. Let's see. Okay, now Ara is gonna give it a shot. Go Ara. Okay. There it goes. It is doing what it's supposed to. Yep. Road test passed.
च्या ग्रुपमध्ये त्याला कधी बघितलं नाही. चे बाकीचे फ्रेंड्स येतात असतात ना घरी.